Jack Smith is illegal, not allowed to be prosecuting this case because he was not appointed by the president or confirmed by the Senate. And not only is his appointment illegal, he's also taking money that is not him. Illegal appropriations as well. This is Trump's final reply to the motion to dismiss the Florida classified documents case based on Jack Smith's illegal appointment. We'll also hear from Bolton and Clavicle Girl in this segment. But let's jump right in. This is Judge Cannon's courtroom. Donald Trump is replying. The case is United States District Court classified documents case. West Palm Beach Division, Florida. Judge Cannon is the judge presiding. Trump says Jack Smith is illegal and he needs to go. Your Honor, Judge Cannon, this is our final reply in further support of the motion to dismiss the indictment based on Jack Smith's unlawful and illegal and unconstitutional appointment and his illegal funding for deranged thug Jack. Says, Your Honor, Judge Cannon says Jack Smith's office does not dispute a very important concept here. They don't even disagree with us. They don't say or challenge that Jack Smith is an officer under the United States. They don't dispute that the default under the appointments clause is that an officer is a principal officer and that the Reno regulations replace the expired statutory independent counsel regime. They don't dispute any of that. And the office provides no contrary authority suggesting that, quote, established by law in the appointments clause means anything but a congressional enactment. Their arguments don't have any basis. Instead, the office relies from Jack on inopposite case law and these different statutory provisions which don't give him the authority that the appointment clause requires. So Jack is illegal. The case law cited by Jack's office, first of all, Judge Cannon, it's incorrect, okay, and it's non-binding, idiots over there, says the Nixon court's citation to Section 515 in connection with discussion of an issue that was not even in dispute in the case and is not central to the court's holding is not binding, saying Jack Smith is citing this Nixon case. And in Nixon, apparently there's a sentence in there that says something about Section 515. But Section 515 had nothing to do with the ultimate case in Nixon. It's like just some judge, opining on something. But it's not actually binding. It's not part of the holding. Like whether the judge made that statement or not doesn't impact anything. Saying judicial decisions do not stand as binding precedent for points that were not raised, not argued, and not even analyzed. So don't point to something that's not consequential. So the special counsel then cites two cases from the DC Circuit, and they wrongly applied Nixon as binding precedent, saying that they have authority to exist. They give us a breakdown here. In this case, the DC Circuit was required to apply this case as binding precedent in a way that it's not. In this case, the DC Circuit also acknowledged that the Reno regulations, quote, do not explicitly authorize the AG to create an office of independent counsel virtually free of ongoing supervision. And then they cited Nixon in order to read the Reno regulations as accommodating the delegation made here. And here, in this case, they also reason that the independent counsel appointed by the AG is an inferior officer, yet is free of ongoing supervision of the AG. So there's a distinction here between the IC. Remember, the independent counsel was something that did exist, and now it doesn't. So when they lost the independent counsel, which was a little bit more independent, Reno came out and said, we'll use all of these other statutes to cobble together the same powers. And saying in another case cited by Jack Smith, SCOTUS made clear that every inferior officer must be subordinate to a superior officer. That makes sense. And Edmund serves as another reason why this is non-binding. Okay, so that case Jack's relying on is non-binding. So let's get into the statutes, they say. Trump's defense rights to Judge Cannon says the law allows the Attorney General to, quote, specially appoint U.S. attorneys in certain prosecutions. That's the law. Section 515. Okay, U.S. attorneys. However, the statute does not authorize the AG to appoint attorneys other than Senate-confirmed U.S. attorneys. So it's not any attorney, it is a U.S. attorney. How do we get U.S. attorneys? Through presidential appointment and Senate confirmation. Did Jack do that? No. So that's what the law says. Now, Jack Smith wants to use the DOJ's full prosecutorial authority, but he didn't get appropriately appointed. Interpreting 515A in that fashion would allow the AG, Merrick, to appoint prosecutors more powerful than U.S. attorneys without any input from Congress. Jack Smith, he has the full prosecutorial power of the U.S. government, but he answers to no one and he has national jurisdiction. Who knows where? Such unchecked power flies in the face of the well-established and the essential limits on the exercise of prosecutorial discretion. If U.S. attorneys are principal officers, and they are, then so too must Jack Smith. He must also be a principal officer, just like they are, if he has the same powers. And if that's true, if he is a principal officer, guess what? He must have Senate confirmation. Now, this other provision of the law doesn't give them an escape hatch. Section 5 533 is not cited in the Reno regulations, and it cannot even support their appointment. The statute is located in a part of the U.S. Code that addresses, the FBI, not special counsels, and the interpretation assigned to that by Jack's office would eviscerate the statutory structure. Like, all the DOJ powers are in one section. Well, we don't have anything in here. Let's go to the FBI. If, as Jack Smith claims, that 533 aligns perfectly with the special counsel, who combines the typical role of law enforcement and prosecutors, then the office would not need to partner with the FBI as they've done in connection with the case. Yeah, then why'd they work with the FBI? Why didn't they just go investigate the case if that's what they do? The analogy by Jack Smith's office also fails. Talking about Department of Transportation people. Many department heads have similar authority, but Congress gave the AG the power to appoint such additional officers and employees as he deems necessary, but only for the Bureau of Prisons, okay, not the DOJ. So in other words, don't analogize this to agriculture or to education or health and human services. Like, you can just hire people. No. Congress specifically limited this, right? Because they want oversight over the U.S. attorneys. They claim that Jack Smith is subject to the direction of the AG, of Merrick Garland. But the office assured the judge presiding in the D.C. case that the coordination with the Biden administration is non-existent. So apparently it doesn't exist. So their stories are a little bit off here, aren't they? They say that Biden has no control, no authority. Merrick Garland is totally arm's length away from Jack Smith. Okay, so that means he's got total power, but he wasn't appointed by the Senate. Or he is under your control, and this is a political prosecution. So which one is it? There is a significant tension between the insurances here, between the claim that Jack Smith is independent and not prosecuting, the Republican nominee for president at the direction of Joe Biden, and the assurance here that Smith is not independent. Oh no, he's not independent, and he's so thoroughly supervised that the court should not be concerned about his tremendous power being exercised over the trajectory over the presidential election. Sorry guys, can't have it both ways. Now, Jack Smith also argues that Jack lacks the, quote, same level of independence as an independent counsel, but he argues that he remains independent enough, even under the Reno regulations, to qualify for the money. But in 2004, however, the DOJ told the GAO, I think it's the General Accountability Office something, that special counsel Fitzgerald's exclusion from the Reno regulations contributes to the special counsel independence. Special counsel Fitzgerald was delegated the full authority of the AG and the powers of the acting AG that Comey described as significantly broader than those given to other special counsels. The more expansive authority that was granted to Fitzgerald and his independence for the AG was decisive for the GAO in its assessment of his access to the money. Now, prior to the Reno regs, attorneys appointed to the independent counsel were permitted to depart from DOJ procedures when those procedures were inconsistent with the law, such as when it would compromise their independence from the DOJ. Now, although not subject to day-to-day supervision, special counsels are bound by the department, by their review procedures, saying that the Reno regs offer a variety of different levels of review before steps could be taken to control these special counsels. They must notify the AG of significant events in accordance with department guidelines. The notice must provide for an opportunity to consult. They must be apprised when they're seeking indictment in sensitive cases, when they're executing search warrants, when they're taking significant investigative steps, and other things. In extraordinary circumstances only, a special counsel may bypass the different layers and consult directly with the AG. Even then, the AG has an avenue to overrule such action. Now, citing these and other provisions, the Congressional Research Service, outside legal experts, and even the government have concluded that the Reno regulations contain provisions inconsistent with independence. So they're not actually independent. The independent counsel was trying to be independent, but if the special counsel has to comply with all the DOJ requirements, notified, blah, 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 and they're not really independent. Now, the historical citations cited by Jack's office do not address this argument, which is that prosecutors appointed under the Reno regulations do not enjoy the requisite level of independence to get the independent counsel money. It's not the same. There's independent counsel money, but it's not yours. The only relevant examples cited by the office are Jack Danforth and John Durham. When Danforth was appointed, the Reno regs were brand new. Danforth issued findings in less than 14 months, and the only person he indicted pled guilty without litigation. Thus, no one had an incentive to challenge his funding. So that leaves Durham, which is a single example insufficient to establish some long-standing practice. Now, to be clear, offering Jack Smith a blank check has harmed Trump's substantial rights. And this is a point we don't hear enough. Jack Smith is a government-funded opposition research arm of Trump to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. The DOJ simply could have not funded the entirety of Jack Smith's expansive, politically motivated witch hunt from some alternative source. They only had one piggy bank that they could raid for this. What has transpired since Jack's appointment is exactly what has caused concern as the Independent Counsel Act expired. It eliminates the incentive to investigate trivial matters and use the law as a cudgel. Since the founding, resource constraints on prosecutors have been regarded as an indispensable guarantee of substantive fairness. Don't give someone a blank check, otherwise they'll use it all. The purse and the sword ought never to be in the same hands, right? Don't give Jack Smith the right to just write his own checks, whether legislative or executive. The lack of any such constraints here has allowed Jack's office to engage in an unabashed political crusade with zero accountability. Now, Jack's office is pursuing 2 cases in 2 jurisdictions to maximize their interference during an ongoing presidential election. This tactic is the luxury of a prosecutor who faces no resource constraints, and it's far from a foregone conclusion, as Jack seems to treat it, that the DOJ could readily have funded this from other appropriations if available. In 2019, for example, the DOJ was forced to prioritize its antitrust review of Google over Apple because it couldn't afford to pursue both because they're just so bloated and fat. Now, even if the DOJ could shift alternate funding sources to this, still doesn't remedy the wrong. Where an official exercises power that they don't lawfully possess, it's invalid. And so, for the foregoing reasons, Trump respectfully submits that the court should dismiss this indictment because Jack Smith is illegally appointed and he's stealing lawful government money, and he doesn't have lawful access to those appropriations because he's not appointed by the president. He's not a U.S. attorney. Signed by Emil Bove, Christopher Keese, on behalf of Donald Trump in Florida. Going to Judge Cannon. This is the final reply. Jack Smith has had his say. Now it is off to Judge Cannon for a review. And if Trump is successful on this, guess what? Bye, Jack. That's the end of the case. Case could be over if she grants it. I hope she does, because it is a good argument that Jack Smith has not rebutted. Jack Smith came from nowhere. They just pick him out. Hey, you can do whatever you want all the time with his unlimited money. Have fun. Go after Trump. You hate him? Go after him. Trump has to come out of pocket 2, 3, maybe 10 times to respond to that, right? A government prosecutor spends $1, you got to spend 10 to respond. So they're concerned now that Trump might win. Here's John Bolton, who's really freaked out about this, says if Trump wins, there might be retribution for all of this. All this lawfare, this political warfare going on, well, maybe repercussions coming back their direction. We'll have to see. John Bolton's freaked out about it. Here's what he says about this.
As he says frequently on the campaign trail, this will be a retribution presidency.
Let's go!
Now, he says the deep state, or whatever you want to call it, comes against him because he stands between his enemies and his followers. And they're really after his followers, and he's just kind of taking the heat.
Well, they are in many ways. I mean, they censor everybody so that we can't hear from Trump. Like, we are also victims in this onslaught. They are openly propagandizing us every single day, saying we can't participate, mandating we do certain things, wrecking our dollar, right? All of this is an attack on us, but it's also an attack on Trump, right? He is the symbol of all of this. So here's what Bolton has to say.
And the retribution, he says, will be on behalf of his supporters, not about him personally. Well, that's ridiculous. Of course it's about Donald Trump personally. Everything is to him.
It can be about both,
So
John.
when he says that Mark Milley, for example, for doing the right thing during the tumultuous time after the 2020 election, called his Chinese counterpart and said, don't read this wrongly. There's really nothing here that you should be worried about.
Not
Trump
under
describes
Trump's order.
that as treason.
Did Trump tell him not to do that? Did Trump give him permission to do that? Did Trump say, hey, call our Chinese counterparts and say whatever the hell you want? Did he consult with Trump? No.
And reminds people that back in the day, the penalty for treason was hanging. So should Mark Milley be worried if Donald Trump gets a second term? Absolutely.
Yeah, well, don't sell out your country, right? Don't commit treasonous acts that are questionably treasonous. And you don't have to worry about the penalties for treason. Don't be a traitor. How about that, John? Pretty easy. Don't have to try too hard to avoid the penalties for that one. So here is Cassidy Hutchinson, who has been shown to be a liar about the clavicle attack. She is also known as Clavicle Girl, and she is saying Trump is frightened of the truth emerging, which is weird because we just heard from her and her lies. She said that somebody told her that Trump attacked the driver and grabbed him by the clavicle. Well, the person that she said told her that story never heard about it. And it took her 4 interviews with Liz Cheney until she figured out this story would be useful for the American airwaves, and they lied to us in their little propaganda book report show. So Clavicle Girl shows up with MSNBC's hit show called Inside Jen Psaki for this ridiculous interview. Here's what it sounds like.
Trump posted, will she be prosecuted for what she did and said? What is your response to that?
You know, Jen, I have been part of the Trump administration for several years, and I know when he starts to get nervous, nervous. I know that Donald Trump has to be nervous, if not extremely frightened right now, because what is happening is he is deploying his most loyal allies on Capitol Hill to try to discredit not only my testimony, but the entire January 6th investigation as a whole. The facts are out there, and he doesn't want the facts out there because he doesn't want the American people to know what actually happened.
What actually happened? You made up a story that never actually happened, and it captured the media's attention because they're so dumb, or let's say propaganda people, that it captured the airwaves for like a week. It was all fake. You lied about that story.
He's hoping that his false narrative of what happened on January 6th is what the American people will believe heading up to the November election. And it's really imperative that we keep speaking about the truth, because the facts are the facts, and Donald Trump has tried to smear those with his deceit and his lies. Now, what I will say to that too, though, is when you mentioned the report, much of my testimony is corroborated, but there also is one key piece, and that's the fact that he knew that there were weapons in the crowd. His Secret Service agents testified that he was aware that that's why they were not coming through the magnetometers. That's a key piece of evidence for the American people to know, and for the jury, hopefully, that will convene before the election, because it speaks to his state of mind. And it also is reported that only 1 hour after he got back from the
fact that some people in the crowd had weapons speaks to his state of mind, like he's going to use those weapons to take control of the country. They weren't used. Like, there was no weapons. There was like one guy who shot a gun off at some point, maybe. And I think they just charged that dude. So what weapons? There were flagpoles.
Lips. He called Kevin McCarthy and said that it was Antifa attacking the Capitol.
Well,
but he also said that they were his people. So, all this being said, Jen.
And the Fed.
Donald Trump
FBI,
lashes out when he feels threatened.
Homeland
and he's lashing
Security.
out right now because he does not want the American people to know that he was responsible for the single most egregious attack on our democracy.
Okay, so they're just rolling her out. Okay, she's joined with a lot of the other, the TDS Spice Girls. So they're going to be bringing them out, parading them around, and continue to, I guess, make up stories that Jen Psaki will share with her viewers over there on MSNBC. So, all right, my friends, that is what is cooking there. Now, hopefully Judge Cannon comes back out, finds that Jack Smith is an illegal prosecutor who illegally invaded the DOJ, and he needs to be deported immediately, and the money needs to be returned, and the cases against Trump should be dismissed, and an apology letter should be drafted. So we'll be here continuing to cover this, my friends. Thank you for subscribing wherever you're watching this. Thanks for liking this video, sharing it with a friend or family member so that they can see just how illegal Jack Smith really is. They'll be shocked, as we were, but we got some great links down in the description below. Thanks for checking out watchingthewatchers.locals.com, which is our members only community. We do streams in the morning. We talk about a bunch of stuff that we can't get to here. We'd love to have you join us. It's a great community and a great way to support our work. And we'll see you back here on the next one.